he would have her up on his lap. He'd be cuddling her. If it was nighttime, she kissed him right on the lips. And he walked right to that bathroom. He opened that bathroom door. These girls are naked. He whips back that shower curtain.
That one reason why he's worried is because now you got 40 kids leaving that are going to tell their story somewhere in the world.
Her son, Elijah, has just told her that Vance was S-ing boys in the ocean. And his response to me was, honey, this is Haiti. If I took the time to call every parent every time something happened here, I wouldn't get anything done.
And this is why we've had red flags about Dr. Michael Brown for a long time.
Michael Brown knows about it.
Michael knows
and
about it.
does not make you aware of it, even though he knows that you're working with him and he knows that your children are living with him in Haiti.
Dr. Michael Brown has built a platform on defending abusive leaders. From the stage at IHOP KC in 2023, he told us not to gossip, not to post on social media, and just to wait and trust in the leadership process, while survivors were being silenced behind the scenes. What most people don't know is that this wasn't his first cover-up. Years earlier, Dr. Brown was involved in another disturbing case. This time, it was tied to Globe Missions and an orphanage in Haiti where children were being sexually abused. And instead of helping families hold leaders accountable, Dr. Brown ran interference again, protecting the institution and not the victims. And now he's under an independent investigation for clergy sexual misconduct himself. But today we're going to be talking with Natalie Lewis, a mother who adopted children from that very orphanage. When she learned the truth about the children that had been abused and that the leadership knew, she was forced into a role of an advocate. While Globe stayed silent, Natalie was the one who warned other families. She should not have had to be the one to do that. This is a story about abuse, betrayal, and a dangerous pattern of Christian leaders who protect each other instead of the most vulnerable among us, the children. But more than that, it's about the victims, it's about the families, and it's about the children who deserved safety and truth. And it's about the courage that it takes to speak up when no one else will. Join us today for our powerful conversation with whistleblower and new friend of ours, Natalie Lewis. All right, welcome to the show, Natalie Lewis. It's great to have you today.
Yes, hey, Natalie.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Awesome. So, Natalie, we met you through covering the situation with Dr. Michael Brown over this last year, and then specifically when we interviewed Londa and we interviewed Catherine Marielke, I know that you had ended up somehow connecting with them after seeing our podcast, and then Londa had reached out to us and said, hey, you guys need to cover this story too. We saw you on Laura Lynn after that because she connected with Laura Lynn as well. Take us through that process and how you decided to speak out again, because we're going to dive into the details of your story, but just talk to the audience about how we kind of ended up speaking out again here.
Yeah, so just to back up a little bit, someone had reached out to me last fall wanting to know if I would possibly want to speak to, they said that there was the Royce report where Dr. Brown was being investigated for a story. They wanted to know if I wanted to speak to them and give testimony to how Dr. Brown kind of interjected himself into our situation with our children that were adopted from Haiti in 2010 and problems that we can get into regarding our children. And at the time I said no. And I just gave you that backstory just to say that for really the past definitely over 10 years, but since the beginning, I have felt pretty kind of forgotten when it comes to the church and what we've been through with our children. It's not a topic that people really want to speak to or hear about. And so I definitely wasn't going to get involved with this and just move forward several months. Well, about 6 weeks later, the article came out about Dr. Brown, and it definitely did something in me. I had no idea that he had been doing those things. I had noticed over the years how he'd put himself into situations like Mike Bickle's situation. I followed Morningstar, and I would say to my mom and to my best friend, like, why does he get in the middle of these things? This sounds like what he did to us. But other than that, I really did leave it alone. And so to read that article, it stirred something in me. And I maybe jumped on there, made a few comments of my own, left it at that, and then jumped forward. It's like a month ago now. My mom texts me late at night and says, Natalie, do you remember Londa? And I said, of course I remember Londa. And she said, well, she's being interviewed right now by Wake Up and Win, and my mom watches your show. And she said, you need to jump on here and listen to her. She will be happy to hear that. So I got on and I started listening, and guys, I just tears streaming down my face that night over just listening to just hearing Londa, how her eyes were seeing things, but it's that same feeling of it's gaslighting. Like you see it, but it's being denied, or it's being spun in a way that you think it's just you, if that makes sense. And so then, a few days later, then I listened to Catherine Mariaki, and that much more just stirred in me. Like, okay, hearing what she had to say about her sister, especially, I decided I needed to give voice to this as well.
Wow. So you saw that, and as it was, that interview just stirred you to say, wait a second, I think it's time to speak up again. Well, we're really glad that you did. And I think you're right. The church doesn't want to hear this stuff, but I do think times have changed, and the church is being forced to listen now. And so here we are. Talk about your background, if you would, with BRSM, Fire School. How did you initially get connected to what ended up being you connecting to Globe and adopting all these children?
Yeah, to just try to keep that brief, which I'm not always good at. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and Pastor Kilpatrick had visited kind of a sister church of ours back in '96. And through that, a friend of mine, actually that church took a bus to Brownsville, and my best friend and I, we hopped on that bus and came to Brownsville. That was late, like November '96. We both drove back a month later, just before Christmas, to visit again, and they announced that there was going to be a school of ministry. Dr. Brown actually got up in the pulpit at Brownsville Assembly of God and said that they had decided through the revival they wanted to birth a school of ministry, and it would be starting in just like 10 days, 2 weeks. I got home from that trip. I was almost completed. I was getting ready to start my student teaching for deaf education. That was my background. And I just announced to my family, to my college, that I was going to walk away from that I was heading to ministry school. And I would say from the time I told my mom I applied to the school, a week later, I was in Pensacola, Florida. I knew nothing about this town. And here I was. And so I was part of the first class. There was 120 students. And that was a 2-year program. I graduated from there, and then I started their 3rd-year internship program. And Dr. Brown actually was the mentor over my 3rd-year internship for travel ministry. So I immersed myself in that. I've traveled many places, many countries, obviously Haiti being one of them. So I jumped in anywhere for volunteering, ended up working at the school for a couple years, and helped actually volunteering to book a lot of their travel team trips around the country, and would connect with the churches and help out and all that. So through that, I did get to know Dr. Brown on that level, but definitely from the mentor aspect and him speaking to us as students, that what's the word I want to say? So there was just a mentality there that started with him and kind of flowed through the staff into the school. Let me even back up. Being part of the first class, they were building rules on top of rules, on top, trying to like navigate this, like, okay, we're in this holy repentance revival, and therefore we need to be above reproach. That's like that's always stood to me, that term, like above reproach. And specifically the girls, they definitely came down so much harder on the girls. And so it started out like, okay, just casual clothes but modest, things like that, and then like rules would be added on top of rules. And by second semester and third semester, it became a very just hyper religious atmosphere with how we were to behave. And my point is, I evolved with that. Like, as it was added, of course I wanted to do the right thing. Like, oh, this is what it means to be holy. This is what it means. So, but what happened, it really became, for me, it was about pleasing Dr. Brown, about pleasing the staff, the bosses over me at the school, more than even probably, well, God, what does God want? And so I said that to say that that's definitely a mentality that I went on with as I graduated into the internship, into marriage, into raising my children. It was always in the back of my head, really up until probably the past 10, 15 years.
Well, I'm sure in some ways too, the pleasing the leadership comes around as like because you said, you kind of put it in contrast to like pleasing God versus pleasing the leadership. But in so many minds, because of what's inundated into the charismatic movement, the leadership is God's voice to the people. That's so much Absolutely. Of what's owned in the charismatic movement, to where it's like, well, if I'm obeying Mike, then I'm obeying God, or if I'm obeying whatever the leader is. And I think there's an aspect to spiritual authority, or whatever you want to call it, like Hebrews 13, respect your leaders, etc., that's real. But then there's this thing that's manipulated that ends up being utilized to control people and actually really damage people's walk with God. Because suddenly you're walking the line of like, okay, whatever the rule is at the school, then you take that into your personal life afterward, and you take it into your marriage, and you're just like, wait a second, why am I acting like this? And God's like, well, that wasn't me. That was somebody different,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll give you an example, just because I thought of it since we're talking about the school. My husband, we've been married 24 years, and I married an amazing man that not too many men would walk out what we have walked out, not just adopting our children and the sacrifices that we've made, but even once we found out that our children had been abused in Haiti, and it changed the whole dynamics of our home and how we needed to put protective measures in place, like just the strength of my husband. And when I met him, it was at my best friend's wedding. He was the cousin of Melissa's first husband. And we fell in love pretty quickly. And I wanted a certain teacher at the school to perform our marriage. And I worked there, and I had done mission trips with this particular teacher and very much looked up to him and his wife. And I went to his office one day to let him know that I was engaged and that our wedding was going to be pretty fast, like in three months, and wondered if he would perform the ceremony. And as we're in the office talking and he's asking questions, he decides to let me know his disappointment in my choice, because he felt that my husband hadn't been immersed in the holy environment and the calling that appeared to be on my life. And even question, like, I have a sister that's mentally challenged that has lived with me since she was 17. I'm 6 years older than her. And he asked, well, where is your sister going to live when you get married? And I said, with us. he said, absolutely. I said, he's very good to Angie. She'll live with us. And he said, I just don't think that's good. A married man with another adult woman in the house, that could really cause problems. And I'm like in my head thinking, well, what does he mean? And then he just said, I think this looks unequally yoked. I mean, there was definitely more to it, but what he said, and it put that in my head, and that he really did not want to do that ceremony. And about a month later, I actually broke everything off with my husband. I broke off the engagement and everything. I decided that he wasn't on the path that I was headed. And we broke up for a year, and I couldn't shake it that I loved him. And so what I'm getting at is when we got back together a year later, it was just before the split that had taken place between Brownsville and BRSM and fire. I didn't even bother at this point letting in this, the staff know that this who I'm marrying, and I married. So it's almost like I married my husband in shame, if that's the right way to say it, like as if I had made this choice that wasn't good enough for what the calling was. So when the split happened and that particular teacher went on with fire and the students, and I decided I didn't want to be a part of all of that anymore, we definitely pulled away from that.
That makes sense. So you guys end up getting married. Fast forward to Globe, and just for everybody's,
yes,
without getting into all the details and nuances of Globe, basically they were a missions organization connected with Fire School and is it Liberty Church? They come out of Liberty Church, or they came out of Fire?
Yes. So Ken Summerall founded Liberty Bible College, and through that, Globe came out of that as a mission sending organization. I believe dates back to the 70s with missionaries, and still sending and still today have missionaries on the field. And so when we were a new school, BRSM, that was their mission sending organization for the early graduates in the early years. BRSM eventually had Fire International, and then Fire School had Fire International, but Globe was our go-to for missions, and they sat on the same campus as BRSM, our school. So like Dr. Brown and the staff of BRSM was in one building, and then there was a building out back behind that was all of the Globe staff. So we interacted with them. I worked at BRSM, so I interacted, with employees there. But as far as where I got involved with Haiti and Globe, one of the Globe missionaries, Keith and Cindy Lashbrook, they were missionaries to Haiti, and they were Globe missionaries, and it was through Globe that I met them and I went to Haiti in March 1998 on a mission trip, and my whole world changed on that mission trip. I had taken other trips. I'd been to Italy in the fall, and but this was my first into a world like that, and absolutely changed obviously to this day, my whole life. I fell in love with the children there, and felt very strong when I was leaving that I was going to adopt from there someday. I was still a single young woman. I was 23 at the time, and I felt I heard God tell me that your children are here, is what I had heard. And I remember asking the pastor that was there at the time about, he was an American, and asked if Americans could adopt Haitian children. And at the time he said, well, no, they can't. The embargo that was in place at the time, you couldn't even adopt. And over the next few years that opened up. But that was my connection, though, to Globe. Is as I came back to school, my whole heart for Haiti, I kept connected with Keith and Cindy Lashbrook and supported their ministry. And in 2003, I was married in 2001, but 2003 is when our son Benjamin was brought to the orphanage, and he was the first baby actually brought to this Lashbrook Family Ministries orphanage, and we eventually adopted him.
2003 is the first child that came into one of their orphanages, the Lashbrooks, is that?
Only a baby. So they would have been there since the mid-90s. They had at first just teen boys on the streets. They opened their home to them, and then they started an orphanage from there. But Ben was only under a month old. His mother had died in childbirth. And so that really spoke to me, was here's this baby that does not have a mama.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful. So, so you went to Haiti in the 90s, just struck your heart. You realize I'm going to eventually adopt someday from here. Now
Yes.
and now we understand the Lashbrooks. They had started this orphanage in Haiti in the 90s, and years later, fast forward, you get married.
Yeah.
The earthquake happens. Is that when you go back, or is that when you adopt?
Yes.
Or talk about that?
Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Wake Up and Win Insurance. We help clients all over the nation with their term life, whole life, or universal life insurance, and we're definitely happy to help you with a consultation.
Check the description below for more info.
So I stayed connected with Keith since the days of BRSM. They were like heroes to me, and I very much looked up to them. So when we started our adoption process with our son Benjamin, we just became that much closer to them. Through our first adoption with Benjamin, and we brought him home in 2006. It took quite a while to bring him home. Other families started to want to adopt children from Keith's orphanage as it was growing. And Keith asked me to volunteer as a stateside adoption coordinator for his mission. And that kind of brought me in more to get familiar with Globe.
Well, I guess I just want to know that process of whenever you adopted your son, you adopted him, but you didn't have him here. So you were sending money, right?
Yes.
Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, that's good. So when we started adopting Benjamin, we were the first parents to adopt from Keith's orphanage. And he was in Haiti, Benjamin was. My husband and I, we found out about him Christmas 2003, and we went to meet him in April 2004 and decided that we were going to adopt him. So the way it started is anything for his monthly support or adoption fees went through Globe. We would send it to them, and then they would send it on to Keith Lashbrook. And then my husband and I, we would actually go visit him or take turns visiting him. And then through that is how we started to meet our other children, because obviously our family grew. We didn't just adopt Benjamin. We have 9 children adopted from Haiti.
Wow. And you have, how many children do you have in your house right now?
Well, we have 13 children, but in our home, we still have 6 living here. But we have 3 still left in school.
Gotcha.
The rest, they're all over the place.
Okay, so let's fast. So that's helpful. That was a good question because it kind of gives us a picture of you're going back and forth individually.
Well, also, yeah, I just want to figure out, because you said the money went to Globe.
Yes.
You guys, the money went to Globe, and then from Globe to the Lashbrooks. And then
Yes.
Is that how it normally works with whenever you adopt a child? It's like your child, you're supporting this child, but you don't even know when they're going to be able to come be with you. And it could take years and years and years.
Yeah, so this particular situation was a little bit like the Wild Wild West, because adoptions were fairly new for children out of Haiti. You did not have to go through an adoption agency. However, we chose to go through an adoption agency for all of the stateside paperwork. We didn't use them for the Haiti side. Keith wanted to do all of that on his own, and it was very expensive. And so through that process, stateside, so we had money going to Keith through Globe, and then we had money going to our adoption agency stateside. And they had me doing so much of the legwork, this adoption agency and Keith, and I just kind of am a quick learner in those areas. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, if more adoptions start to take place in this orphanage, I can help these other parents literally save like $20,000. They can do the stateside. That's the way Haiti was. Now, if it's China or Russia, you cannot do that. And mm-hmm. I also believe Haiti has changed since the earthquake. This is before. But so that's how I became the stateside adoption coordinator. I started out just helping people. And then so many families started adopting that Keith asked me to take that role as adoption coordinator.
You were going back and forth to visit. You went to the actual orphanage, and whenever you were there, did you notice anything weird? Did you think anything was off, or were
That's
you just like, this is perfect?
Is there a red flag looking back? I mean, I'm sure in 2020,
looking back always, but when you were there, were you like, this place is a little weird, or no?
Okay, so that gets back to that kind of spiritual training I had in me at BRSM, where you don't touch God's anointed, you don't question God's anointed. There were absolutely some things that, and they grew over time, but the difference between when Chris and I first went to Haiti compared to when the earthquake happened is like night and day. So when we first went to meet Benjamin, there were maybe 15 teen boys and some toddlers, and then Ben being a baby. And one girl was there at the time who I think she was 10 that we got to know. So it was a tighter structure going on. And I can't say that I saw red flags on that trip. It was not until the future visits started happening. So if you jump forward, Ben's already home. We have 3, actually became 4 under the age of 5.
Wow.
And I was also a teacher at the time. So I was a pretty busy mama. And so what we did is Chris and I would actually take turns at this point visiting Haiti, because we were adopting our 2 oldest sons and for a little while, just one daughter. And then it did grow from there. But my point is when I noticed things really start to change was around 2007 to 2008. And Keith had brought his brother-in-law and his sister to serve there. And they had grown, I would say at this point, probably around 100 children. Wow. I think at the earthquake, they were at the height of over 150 plus children, and they were not accommodated to handle it. And so if you jump back, so 2007 to 2008, Vance Cherry and Keith's sister Hannah Cherry, they were married. He brought them there to serve at the boys' home. So they moved off of what they had built. There was a church that had the school met at the church, and they had their home that they had built for themselves. It was all in a compound, and then a boys' home. And Keith and Cindy rented a home down the street that they called a creche, and they brought all the girls there, and the babies were there. Vance and Hannah they ran the boys' home, and it's during those trips that I definitely started to see things off. If you want.
Can you give us an example? Or
So the way that Vance treated the boys, the way that my sons acted around him, definitely looking back hindsight, but I did actually call him out on it one time. And so I had returned to the States, and my oldest son, who's now 32, he wanted to call me to talk to me. And he borrowed somebody's phone, and it was taken away from him. And Keith called right after that, and he said, "Natalie, I hear that Joshua just called you. Vance has grounded him from calling you because he was being disrespectful to him, and therefore you won't be hearing from him for a while because he disobeyed Vance, and he needs to learn to submit." And I'm like, now at this point, these are my adopted children. The way it works there, even though it becomes the adoption's final, you wait on the visa process just to get them home. So this is actually my son in their care, but Vance was extremely controlling over these boys. Wow. And so I got very upset over that situation. I challenged him. And again, that old teaching in me, I literally felt like a Jezebel in how I confronted him. It was this idea that I was getting in the middle of a structure that Keith had set up. Vance also had attended BRSM, by the way, and I was not to cross Vance. Jump forward. Joshua as all this unfolds a few years later, he lets me know, Mom, the reason why I was trying to call you from somebody else's phone, Vance had just SA'd him, and he was trying to let me know, to get help, for somebody to care. And then he went on to even tell me that he had written a letter to me at one point to get to me, and he had given it to some missionaries who traveled in. And he said, Mom, why didn't you ever respond to that letter? And I said, Joshua, I never got that letter.
Jeez.
So my older boys were trying to speak up, and they were also, they were afraid. And then I also want to point out with Keith, he just started becoming, it was almost like he's the king. Even other parents that would, so because I was adoption coordinator, I would actually travel and take parents to meet their children for the first time. I would just go, I get to see my kids, but I was bringing them because the whole process of getting through Port-au-Prince, everything, and helping them, I was used to it at this point. And so we would be visiting at the creche and sitting in the living room. My adoptive children might be around me. Adopted couples, a couple of them might have been with us. And Keith would just so casually, specifically one girl who at this point would have been 13 to 14 years old, he would have her up on his lap. He'd be cuddling her. If it was nighttime, she kissed him right on the lips. Keith always kept a toothpick in his mouth, by the way. Even jumped forward in court. The judge had to tell him to get his toothpick out of his mouth. He never went anywhere without his toothpick. He called it his anointing. He would have the girls.
That's weird.
Yeah, he's weird. He would have the girls kiss him and sometimes let them take the toothpick and then give the toothpick back to him. And one time, this particular girl was upset about something, and I'd walked into the room, and it was their open area where they ate and hung out with a TV, and he was sitting on the floor kind of cradling her. And she's a fully developed teenage girl, and Cindy was off to the side, and I even looked at her like, this is really odd. But so all the kids called Keith Dad.
Yep.
This particular girl had been with him since she was 9 years old. She was the first girl that he brought in. And she was very dear to my heart. And I'm just thinking in my head, don't question it, because he's Dad. That's what she knows.
Yep.
And okay, yeah.
And real quick, just for those listening, Cindy is
Okay,
Keith's wife. So she's
Cindy
seeing all this go down and is just cool with it.
Yeah, there are times I would look over at her and I couldn't read her of what, obviously we can jump at some point to the court process where they both lost their adopted children in the termination of parental rights hearing because she did not protect the children in Keith's care, and she could not be trusted to protect the children moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So you walk in on this type of a situation, and it's all of the training, and I would say that just the grooming of a culture of honor is what we call it. Culture of honor. Do not touch the Lord's anointed. All of these ideas they groom all of the students, all of the congregants, whether it's a church or a school, to see situations and scenarios that in normal work environment, or you walk into anywhere and see that, you go, wait, what the heck's going on? But because it's somebody who has brought spiritual teaching, spiritual books, whatever you want to call it, made an impact and set themselves up as a spiritual daddy, then when you see situations that are right on the line or right on the edge or a little bit over the edge, it's like, well, I can't call that out because I'll be confronting the Lord's anointed. I would be a Jezebel, or I would be rebellious, or this, that, or the other. So I completely understand, the conflict, and even saying it now, how frustrating it must be, to go, well, I saw that, I should have this, or I should have this. But it's like when you're groomed in a cult-like atmosphere, we see the same thing with Michael Brown, when he said, oh yeah, everything I did whether it was smacking Sarah Monk in the behind, or getting a kiss from her, all of it was spiritual daddy. I was just being a spiritual father. and none of it was sexual at all. And the fact that there's people out there that actually accept that. There's people that have followed Mike Brown for years, decades, and they go, oh no, he was just being a spiritual dad. He just had lack of judgment. It shows the ability of these type of men to spiritually groom and manipulate people based on their anointing. And anyway, I just want to kind of bring that up.
Yeah, I feel like this is even more intense because it is an orphanage. So it is
Yes.
literally kids who do not have a parent. And you obviously have a heart for these kids. And so it's like made to look like, oh, he's being the father they never had. He's being
Yes.
fatherly to them. But he's really being very inappropriate and come to find out abusive. And so it's just so sickening too.
And I also want to say, because it's an orphanage in a foreign country, a lot of times these scenarios and situations can be justified because of culture, or like you can be there and be like, well, maybe I'm not in the culture as much to know that this is that and this is what they do, or this, that, or the other. And I'm just going to say, no matter what culture or where you're at, if you see something that's crossing a line with a child, then it's always, clearly we know this now, but it's always wrong. It's always wrong. And you telling your story, I'm just struck by the fact that this is real, this happened, and we're going to get into some of the details here in a few minutes, but I hope that this podcast goes out, that this recording goes out, and that people that are around other places, whether it's locally here or overseas, that are witnessing things like this, that the red flags will go up and that the reporting will begin. Because we can never go back and change the past, but what we can do is speak up in a way that changes our children's future, and not just our kids, but the kids involved in the church and involved in religious organizations. We can speak up like you are doing, like Shersty and like Melissa and many others that are speaking up. It's going to change other people's lives. And so again, I just want to appreciate you blowing the whistle and speaking up.
I want to share something that I'm actually ashamed to share. Looking back, it makes me realize just how stupid I was. My older daughter just reminded me the other day of a situation, and I went back then. I'm able to refer back to all these notes that I would have either given the investigator or the attorney for the termination parental rights, and I was able to go back and reread exactly what I had typed out for her for this situation, and again realize that I wasn't just coming out of that cult mentality on me from attending BRSM and working for BRSM, but having followed Keith all these years and now working for him. He was like a big brother to me. This family would come into our home when they were in the States. When they bought an RV to travel for their, itineraries with churches and funding, they would stay sometimes 1-2 weeks plugged up to our house, stayed in their RV, had dinner with us. Their kids, their teenage kids would stay with us. Their son Daniel was with me, staying with me, and let me know he was going to propose to his girlfriend. And we went looking at rings together. This is how much I loved his children and I respected Keith. So I said that to say that one of the last trips I was there, I believe it was the last trip before the earthquake, and it was spring 2009 or possibly 2008. We were so, because of Vance and how he was running things, once my boys were adopted out of there, I stopped actually traveling all the way to the orphanage. I would have my kids flown from Port-au-Paix, where the orphanage is, to Port-au-Prince. And I would stay. Usually another parent was with me and their children would come too. And Port-au-Prince is where you got paperwork stuff done anyway. We would stay at a hotel that had a pool and a restaurant. My kids would get to visit with me in that atmosphere instead of the orphanage. The other families really enjoyed that as well. A lot of parents had run-ins with Vance and they were avoiding that situation with him. So this particular time we're in the hotel. Keith and Cindy are staying there as well. And I had been at the pool with the kids, and Keith had come to our hotel room to talk to me about something. I had actually brought my biological son with me on this particular trip. He's sitting on the TV or on the bed watching TV, And I had my girls go in to get showered and changed, and they ranged in age from 10 down to my youngest, Annabelle, was 2 at the time. And they were giggling and laughing just like kids do. It's a big walk-in shower. Keith is trying to tell me something. He's very stressed about what he's talking to me about. It had to do with adoption paperwork stuff. And the girls were getting louder, and next thing I knew, I could hear Annabelle start crying. She's my 2-year-old then, start crying really loud. And my mama reaction, these are my babies, I'm starting to move towards the door. But before I could do it, Keith did. And he walked right to that bathroom. He opened that bathroom door. I went to stand at the door because my son is right there, and these girls are naked. Keith whips back that shower curtain, grabs the girls out, starts spanking their bare bottoms that are wet. And I'm just, my eyes, remember, these are his kids. I mean, they're my kids, but I don't have them home yet. So these are his kids, and they call him Dad. So they're all crying, every one of them. He even spanked Annabelle, who had it ended up being there was soap in her eyes. That's why she was crying. So he flustered over that and says, I'll talk to you later about the matter he wanted to talk about, leaves the hotel room, and I'm grabbing up Annabelle in the towel and just comforting her, and the girls are coming up clinging on me. And as I talked to my daughter Joanna about this the other day, Joanna's 25 now, she said, Mom, he did it all the time. She said, I used to be afraid when it was shower time, because say one of the girls had done something that day, the staff may have let Keith know, he would choose that time to come in to that bathroom and yank that girl out, or even a couple girls would get in trouble, get spanked that hadn't even done anything. And that's what I mean by, like, I witnessed that with my eyes, but I didn't know what to do with that. And all I can do now is ask my daughters to forgive me.
Yeah, that is terrible, and it's sick, and it's also just shows you if he was willing to do that in front of you, you're literally their mom. He's going to do that in front of you when you're there. You could be the one to go in there. Like, just what he did when you weren't around, you know?
Which is where a lot of the abuse took place, was by him, was in that area at their crush.
I just can't imagine what kind of man thinks that's appropriate to do at all. But the fact that he has such lack of awareness of how that would look, that he even felt comfortable doing that in front of you, is so messed up. It's so weird.
And I didn't see it. I didn't see it at the time. I hurt from my girls. I wanted to protect them. But it was, for me as well, about submitting to Keith. Mm-hmm. I did not cross him. Like I said, when I wanted to speak up about some issues uncomfortable with Vance, because the red flags were there for Vance, especially. It was that I'm a Jezebel. It's just this feeling of that had already been put on me.
Well, I can imagine, too, it would be a complicated position to be in because they're also caring for your kids. So you don't want to get on their bad side because they also ground them from talking to you on the phone and stuff like that. It's
right.
A very tough position to be in.
My daughter Jasmine, we started her adoption the summer of 2006. We brought Benjamin home in May of 2006 and found out in July that he had a biological sister that had just been brought to the orphanage. And immediately we said we would adopt Benjamin's sister. So we started that paperwork then. That was 2006. When the earthquake happened in 2010, Jasmine was still there.
Wow.
And that could be a separate story. I could tell you as to why, because there's other red flags. U.S. immigration had caught fraudulent paperwork that Keith had submitted to them. And so she had been my adopted daughter since 2008. We had been waiting for her visa. We found out around Thanksgiving 2009, I received an email from USCIS saying they were denying my daughter's visa because they found fraudulent paperwork submitted by the orphanage. We had to hire an immigration attorney to intervene and help with this to clear it up. just before Christmas, our immigration attorney let us know that it did not look like we were even going to bring home Jasmine because this fraud was so bad. It looked really bad. And so I was reeling from that. Christmas 2009. My daughter, who's been calling me mom, I've been visiting her. She knows me. She's depending on us, waiting to come home. That I was just told by this lawyer that most likely she's not going to be able to fix this. Jump forward just a couple weeks, an earthquake happens. This lawyer got in the middle. She actually came to the embassy while we were there trying to get all the children. So I was there to help get 41 children out. 4 of them were mine. Our lawyer we actually went to the back of USCIS to state our case with this, that where's my daughter going to go now that this massive earthquake has happened? We had to plead our case, and they granted her permission to come home on humanitarian parole. That is the only reason my daughter Jasmine got out of Haiti.
Wow.
So I say that and then I want to speak to, since I did that, I was there for almost 3 weeks, going through all of 41 children, going through their files. The generator, they would turn it on at night. It would be off during the day. So I would be up through the night with another mom. They would take shifts. We would scan this paperwork in, send it to DC. A lady on the other end, who became my friend during this, was one by one granting humanitarian parole for these children. So, that's because of the earthquake, if that doesn't make sense.
So just to understand this, does the so we're thinking you're basically saying that without intervention, without the earthquake happening, you may never have gotten your kids because they were slow rolling it, and obviously we're going to get to this, but
yes,
because there was abuse going on, and it's quite possible that he didn't want to let those kids go. So he's receiving money from you guys month after month after month, year after year after year, and not letting the kids go, and having his way with the kids. And until the earthquake happened, now you're reaching directly to people that are not at the orphanage, but in the government, and they're going boom, boom, boom. Kids are getting released because of this.
Exactly.
Wow.
Benjamin came home in 2006. We were able to get Joshua and Samuel, our 2 older sons, came home November of 2008. That's after 4 years of their process. Other than that, all of the other families, all of us had been waiting. Every family, I would say 90% of the families had started their adoptions in 2006 to 2007. So everyone it was a mass exodus out of this orphanage, 41 children, because of the earthquake.
Goodness gracious.
So yeah, to even speak to that, I'm there and we're working on this paperwork. And Keith was having all of this, I guess he had, I believe, malaria a few years earlier, so he had health problems. Well, he was freaking out. I mean, in hindsight, I'm looking back, and it was so obvious. I'm talking sweats down the forehead, and he kept saying he was stressing over, the earthquake and everything going on, but it was to the point where he was bedridden and had all these people come in to pray over him because he said he was going numb and couldn't feel one side of his body. And so he's having these health problems while I'm trying to get these children out of the country. And so I'm going through these files, and I get to my daughter Joanna's file, and it's empty. I'm like, Keith, where's Joanna's paperwork? And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, there's nothing here. I mean, you got to have something to work with. And he's like, I don't know. And Cindy even looked at me like, what? And so she goes over to I was working at this big desk they have in their office area, and she starts pulling stuff out. She's like, I just had my hands on her paperwork like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Where's her? And she was flustered and looking and looking. We could not find Joanna's paperwork anywhere.
Do you think that Cindy was lying, or do you think that she was in the dark?
I think Cindy was in the dark. I think Cindy genuinely wondered where that paperwork was. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cindy is almost completely deaf. So she wears hearing aids, and she relies on Keith a lot. They were high school sweethearts, got married. She's come along with, there's a whole thing there about Cindy. I want to choose to believe that, now I hold a lot against her. Absolutely. But I don't want to believe that she was complicit. Maybe other people have their opinion. But in this situation, I think she genuinely was like, where is Joanna's paperwork? So I had to set her empty file aside and keep working on the other children. And we were down to the last day. That morning, I had gotten everyone through. We've got the humanitarian parole approved, but not Joanna or Jasmine. But I had the lawyer waiting at the embassy. She was going to help me with Jasmine. But I had nothing to go on for Joanna. So I remember going into Keith's room while he's laying on that bed, acting like he's dying. Keith, I just did all of this. I'm helping, get all these other families, their children out. They're telling me that I'm going to have to go to my daughter today and tell her, I've got to leave you, honey, but I'll come back for you. And so Keith ended up, and I was a lot more firm, by the way, than what I was very upset, like shaking. And he called Pastor Andy, was their Haitian pastor that oversaw everything, including the adoptions. He's the one who would go to the judges and get the paperwork. He calls him in. He starts talking to him about, whatever they needed to discuss with her paperwork. And it was late that evening. The sun was going down. Pastor Andy comes walking into that living room area and says, I got a judge to sign off on all this. He had all new paperwork for my daughter.
Wow.
It was a little, like, okay, I uploaded it. That's all I cared was I uploaded it, not even having an answer yet because it was too late at night. And we got on a bus at like 2 a.m. and drove. It was like a 10 plus hour drive, crazy drive from the north side of the island to the embassy. And I have a really cool picture I could give you if I haven't yet. It's me at the embassy with all the 41 kids all sitting, and it says USCIS or U.S. Embassy on the wall. But it wasn't until I got into the embassy I had our lawyer helping me with Jasmine check on Joanna, which she even helped with so many other families. She was amazing. But yeah, so there was definite paperwork issues, and he did not expect for these kids to just mass exodus out of his orphanage.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to know what exactly that means as far as like fraudulent paperwork. Do you know what that was specifically?
Yeah, I still have the email. I'd have to go back and look specifically. It would have had to do with I believe it was her mother's death certificate. I believe.
So was it like a mistake, or it's like something intentional?
It was fraud.
Yeah. Okay.
In order to get this child basically into the orphanage type of thing.
So what? I'd have to go back and refresh my memory, but it was back when. So she was adopted officially, and then you start working on the visa, and whatever they kept getting pushback on when they would go to these embassy appointments, they would go on our behalf. They decided to take a different route, and this was not a legit. I think they paid somebody under the table is how it was.
Okay, so like let's just to be clear, which we have heard other parents say that they had ran into situations like this, but your daughter, the death certificate of her mother was not accurate because she possibly did not ever die, but the children were sold to the orphanage. Is that kind of what we're saying?
Definitely. I know this about other situations. In this particular situation, my daughter was old enough to see her mother die.
Okay.
So that's Benjamin had just been born. That's her brother, my first adoption. So I do believe that she was dead. I could definitely go back in my emails to better see I know it was, though, something to do with that particular document. It was not correct.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it had to do with how she died or how she was buried. I don't know what it was, but they paid somebody to make, and our government could tell that it was a fake.
Weird.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So it kind of gives just on that point, it kind of gives an idea of what they were willing to do in certain circumstances. Back to earlier, just so we can keep moving this toward, to where we're at once you find out about the abuse. So suddenly, mass exodus of all these kids. Keith is on a deathbed of some kind, sweating, worried, and I'm just gonna assume that one reason why he's worried is because now you got 40 kids leaving that are going to tell their story somewhere in the world. And so now, and Vance probably too is a little concerned at this point in time. So now you are back in the U.S., you've got your kids. What is the first moment you find out about the CSA that took place in Haiti?
Okay. Yeah, so I received a phone call from Melissa, and thinking it's just a normal phone call to chit chat. She is panicked on the phone. She's at the beach with her children, and she lets me know that her son, Elijah, has just told her that Vance was SAing boys in the ocean. That my memory was all about the ocean. I believe she went on to talk about the dormitory, their dorm, the boys' home, but it was about what Vance would do in the water with the boys. And I was reeling. My head was spinning, hearing what she was saying.
And you're hearing this for the first time ever, although you had red flags that from the past, all these things, but for the first time ever, you're going, wait, what I felt was weird about Vance with the boys is terrible. It's worse than I could have thought. And Elijah, who's spoken on the Laura Lynn podcast, he is telling his mother, Melissa, that while they're at the beach, he's probably having a trigger from the beach situation and going, this happened to all these boys. And now you're hearing this. What is your reaction? What is your first thing you do? And when do you reach out to Globe, etc.?
Yeah, the first was like, your feet want to come out from under you, like total fight or flight response. And I hang up with her and I start trying to call Keith. He doesn't answer. I call the stateside coordinator. She said that they were on
Globe?
A hiatus.
For Globe?
Oh, yeah. No, so Keith had his own stateside coordinator through Lashbrook Family Ministries. Her name was Cindy Holmes, based out of their home state, Indiana. So his covering was Globe, and then he had set up his own ministry under them.
Okay.
Called it LFM. And so I called her, and she said, well, they need a break. They don't want to be disturbed right now. They're on a hiatus. It was one of their vacations. They were having several during that time. So I hang up with her, and as my older son comes home, he was fluent English Creole. He's my now 32-year-old son. I had him sit down with my daughters because they were not really speaking much English yet. This is April. They've only been home for a few months. They were in school learning English, but very limited. And so through translation, they start saying, yes, start telling a little bit about some kids that were bad, they said. And they would say, yeah, Vance is a bad man. And so with that said, Josh, my older son, and then his biological brother, my son Samuel.
This is your biological son, Josh?
I'm sorry. I did not mean to say that. Yeah, I messed up. Yeah, Josh, my oldest adopted son.
Okay, gotcha.
And his brother Samuel, who's now 27, they have been home since November 2008. We were having a lot of issues with Samuel. There were a lot of red flags going on with Samuel. I taught at a Christian school, and I had my own office, and came back one day. He had asked his teacher to use the bathroom, and he'd come and snuck into my office and had pulled up pornography on my computer at school. He was in computer class one time, And the teacher there found that he had figured out how to get into pornography on the computer there. And we're having, like, he's only 11 years old. What's going on? I'm thinking I really genuinely thought they were in this safe bubble. How does my son know about this? How does he know to even get on a computer? I didn't even know they were computer savvy. So my point is I'd already gone to Keith a few times about, we had gotten Samuel into counseling right away. So Samuel was getting help, but nothing had ever been said, and my mind had not gone there that it's because somebody did something to him. So that particular day, Samuel decided to open up about other boys in the home. He didn't tell his story yet, but he did. So through that, he told me about a boy that had done something to other kids and had been caught, and that he had a real problem with what he was doing. Well, this happened to be a boy that was adopted by a family. He'd come out with us in January. So my first reaction was, I have got to get a hold of Keith now. This family has this boy, and I'm hearing what he's done. It was really horrific.
So it's not like, oh, sorry, Keith's on hiatus right now. We can't deal with the fact that that there's boys who've been CSA'd, and we need to warn all these adoptive families today, because one day goes by when this is real, and every family is in danger from this situation. But they just kind of pushed you on pause. And moving forward, when did you finally hear from Keith or Vance or whoever? What was that first conversation like?
So definitely within the first 48 hours, I pushed with Cindy Holmes. This is an emergency. I need to hear from him. So I did hear from him. He did call me, and I told him what I knew from Melissa, what my kids had said, and specifically about this boy who is a risk in this other family's home. And his response to me was, honey, this is Haiti. If I took the time to call every parent every time something happened here, I wouldn't get anything done. I had never heard Keith. I'd never heard him flip like that. The way he said it to me, shocked. Yeah. And that was one of our last conversations. And so I was trying to get to Keith, by the way, so he could go to the family. It was his place to go to the family.
Yeah. Right, of course.
And he didn't. My dog's barking.
That's okay.
That's okay.
So I called that mom, and she said, Natalie, something did happen this past week. She said, wow. They had two boys in the home, and both of them had done something to a biological child.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. That's so mind-blowing, and it's so sad, and it's just crazy that the time frame of when you first hear about it is the same time frame that things begin happening, you know. Okay, so you hear this from this other mother. Now what's your next move? Because you were, just for everybody remembering, like, you were a part of facilitating you were the first one to adopt from that orphanage, and then you were a part of facilitating all these other families adopting from the Lashbrooks and from Vance. And so what's your next move? I'm sure you just kind of like start, tell us,
Yeah, so I know within that week, Melissa reached out to Hannah. That is Keith's sister, and she was married to Vance, and he was the one being named as the abuser at that time. And so I know I would have been on the phone with Hannah that week, and her first words to me on the phone was, Natalie, I am so sorry. I thought Keith had made everyone aware. And so... and then I do even have a letter that Hannah did write to all of the parents explaining in detail that she was aware boys had come forward in December 2009. And when she tried to confront this, she was actually put out of the orphanage, and Vance was allowed to stay. When I was there for the earthquake, Vance was there, and their biological son was there, who was about 10 at the time. And I asked where Hannah was, because she never went anywhere without her son. And Keith said that I remember him saying Haiti has a way with people sometimes, and that Hannah was kind of having a mental breakdown,
Wow.
and they sent her to get some therapeutic help back in the States. And really, what it was is he had put Hannah out and allowed Vance to stay.
So Keith, so just for everybody, just so we don't get like all confused here as the viewers, but so you've got Keith and Cindy. They are the head of the orphanage, and then they've got Vance and Hannah are married, and they're over the boys, right?
And Hannah and Keith are brother and
Our
sister.
brother and sister. So Hannah and Keith, brother and sister. Hannah starts to realize what Vance is doing.
Yes.
And they're married, and that causes a break in their marriage initially.
Yes.
And then she brings it to Keith, who she trusts her brother, like, you'll deal with this, right? And instead of dealing with it, because Keith is also doing these things to these children that nobody knows yet, he says, oh, Hannah's having a mental break. She's crazy. We need to put her aside for a bit.
Correct.
And Keith and Vance are just having their way with kids while this woman who's trying to be a whistleblower is now put aside and kind of kicked out. And so now Melissa's telling you, like, Melissa takes us to Hannah and she goes, well, I thought that everybody had been made aware already because we already took this to Keith over a year ago. Is that right? We took this to Keith over a year ago about Vance?
So at this point, it would have been 5 months earlier.
5 months earlier. And the thing is, it seems like everybody trusts Keith. Everybody thinks Keith is going to do the right thing. So they tell Keith about Vance and think he's going to handle it. But because he himself is doing the same things, he does not do anything
running
about
front.
it. He's
running front. And I just want to point this out for everybody in ministry culture, charismatic culture, any church culture, whatever. If you take something to the leadership and they don't get something done, red flag. Red flag immediately. And this is why we've had red flags about Dr. Michael Brown for a long time, because there's a history of allegedly covering up these type of scenarios and situations. Anybody that says, well, don't post about it, don't take legal action, just trust the process, just wait it out. All of those are red flags that show this type of behavior, that there's something. Now, this is the worst of the worst, because this is children. This is CSA. This is devastating. But all the way up through adult clergy sexual abuse, it's all the same patterns of cover up. And if you take things to, quote, the Lord's anointed and they do nothing about it, then you know they're not the Lord's anointed. They're Saul. You might as well kick them out now. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, go ahead.
I kind of want to read this email from Hannah. And, okay, so this is the email from Hannah to the adoptive parents. And for some of the parents, is this the first time they're hearing about this? Or do you know, or you and Melissa have kind of talked to most of the parents? They probably already know.
I would have reached out to all of the parents already.
Okay.
Yes.
I do want to read this email. And if it's out of order, you can tell me, like, if there's a different one we should read first that, you know, you sent to the parents or anything like that. But
no, this is good.
Okay. Adoptive parents. I want to just be clear. So this right here is Hannah. This is Vance Cherry. Remember that name. Mark and avoid Vance Cherry, the abuser's wife. He's been abusing children in this orphanage. And this is his wife sending this email to adoptive parents, and also Keith Lashbrook's sister sending this email. So, adoptive parents, I'm not sure how to greet you. Some of you I have considered like family, and the rest I would have if only we had more time together. The reason I'm writing you now is because I can no longer be silent, and I will no longer allow others to tell my story or partial truths. On April 13th, you received a letter from my brother Keith Lashbrook, director of LFM. In that letter, which I have attached for your reference, Keith spoke of marital problems between Vance and I, as well as accusations of abuse to the children. Since Keith opened the door and spoke of my marital issues, which was not his place, and the other abuse, which is the central issue for you, I am responding not in defense or to accuse, but to tell you what I have experienced. Between October 2009 and December 2009, I had hit my limit with Vance's abuse to me. He has verbally and emotionally abused me over the course of 14 years of marriage, even to the point where we separated several years ago because of it. He said at the point of that separation that he was a new man in Christ and that he would change his abusive ways. However, it continued and had become worse than ever before. In early December, one of the interns, along with a close friend of mine, took the abuse that I was living in to Pastor Andy. Pastor had not realized the level of abuse I had been living in. Pastor called Keith, who was in the States at the time, and spoke with him. And I also shared with Keith how bad things had gotten. I was devastated and quite finished with my marriage and had no hope left. I went to my leadership and to my brother for help. Keith said that he would pray and not make any decisions concerning separating Vance and I without discussing things further with me. Pastor also spoke with Keith about problems that he had with Vance and that he was finished with Vance as well. He thought it best that Vance be removed from the mission. Pastor Andy and his wife became a support system to me during the beginning of what has now become the most painful time in my life. I went to bed that night certain that my cries had been heard, but by morning, Pastor came to me and said that he had bad news. He said that Keith had spoken to his intercessors and some family, and that they had decided that this would in no way support that they would in no way support the separation of Vance and me. The issue was presented before any other accusations had come to light. On December 8th, we had a night of worship, and during that time, I saw a disturbing sexual vision that included Vance and a child. I was completely disgusted. I prayed against the enemy and did not want to believe what I saw and thought was the enemy was bringing perversion and confusion to my mind. Within a few days, I went to Pastor Andy and told him about the vision. He told me at that time that one of the young teenage boys had come to him and told him that Vance had been molesting 5 of the youngest boys on the land. Pastor said he had not wanted to believe that it could be true. He couldn't believe that an American missionary would come and do those things to his people. I asked Pastor to have that young teen come to me and tell me what he knew. We spoke to him with Pastor translating, and I could not believe what I was hearing. I held on to Pastor as I wept and held this boy and told him how sorry I was. Pastor said that we will have to protect the children now and don't let them see you crying. Pastor got Emanuela and the 3 of us went into Pastor's room where no one could hear us talk. Pastor called Keith immediately as I lay on the floor weeping. Keith was broken for me as a brother, but asked me how I could believe that my husband would do these things. I told him he knew he was abusing me and that his character was revealing who he really was, that now his character was revealing who he really was. Keith decided that he would send for Vance to come to the States so that he could talk with him husband to husband about the marriage issues. He did not want Vance to know of the sexual accusations at that time, afraid that he would act out against me or the children before he left. On December 14th, Vance flew to the States to meet with Keith. A couple of days went by and I hadn't heard anything. I asked Pastor to call Keith and find out what was going on. All I knew at that time was what I read on Vance's Facebook status, that he had had a great night having dinner in the States with family. Pastor told me that the plan was that Keith, Cindy, and Vance would be flying back to Haiti on December 21st and that it was all a misunderstanding.
Wow.
I was told that Vance and I would not be allowed at the mission unless we were together as a family. At this point, I stopped all communication with Keith unless it was through Pastor Andy. Keith wanted me to meet with him, Cindy, and Vance in Port-au-Prince to deal with our marriage. Nothing was mentioned at that time of the situation concerning the abuse to the children. Pastor and I were in agreement that I should not meet with them in Port-au-Prince, but that I should go to the States and talk with my father. I packed an overnight bag and left all of my children in the care of Pastor Emanuela and the 2 interns. I left them in my home, and Pastor told me that they would be fine, and he believed that this could be resolved quickly. However, we discussed that there was a possibility that Keith would not allow me back at the mission unless I remained married to and committed to Vance. I flew out December 21st, the same day that Keith, Cindy, and Vance returned to Port-au-Prince to stay at the house in Port-au-Prince. I believed that since I left, that Vance would not be allowed back at the mission since Keith had said he would not allow us to serve if we were separated. Within a couple of days, however, Vance was allowed back in the mission in Port-au-Prince, back in our home and around the children. I was told that I was uncommitted, that I needed to die to self, and it was implied that I had abandoned my own children. This all came from people who I loved and trusted. I was devastated. I could not believe that this was not enough, that Vance had been abusing me, but now it was not being believed what was being said, that he was doing it to the children. I shut down emotionally. Betrayal was the word that seemed to fit how I felt. This situation brought division to my family, some believing the accusations and some not. I was told that I was the one who brought division. Enough was enough. My continual prayer was, God, bring the darkness to light. I started seeing a counselor and kept silent to all the others except a few friends closest to me. I dealt with and continue dealing today with fear, loss, anxiety, depression, pain, anger, revenge, hatred, unforgiveness, and all while the arrows continue to come at me from my own camp. Many of you do not know, but I made plans to go back to Haiti the week after the earthquake to be with all the children. I needed them and they needed me. I had a way to go in and I asked Keith if I could come. He said that he did not need any more problems or division. He said that the children did not need a woman who was not committed. In March, Vance was finally removed from the mission because of other problems he made during his time there. On April 9th, I received my first call from an adoptive mother whose son was telling her and her husband of things that Vance was doing to the boys. He named more kids than the ones that had been mentioned in December. This family was devastated. From this point on, I heard of more of the children talking and telling about what Vance had done to them. I had no contact prior to this phone call with any of the adoptive parents, even though it had been implied that I had contacted them and given them knowledge of the first accusations. My heart grieves with you as parents. I have loved being a part of caring for your children, and my heart cries out for their healing. This great God has stored up all of our tears. He is our healer, our deliverer, our protector, and defender. I will not be silent about this awesome God who delivers us and hears us in our hour of need, in our hour of darkness, even when no one else can. Sincerely, Hannah.
When Hannah called me, a lot of what is in that email is what she would have said to me on the phone. And I mean, I broke. I mean, I'm already under the weight of what my children are starting to open up about. But then to hear the confirmation from Hannah that what I'm hearing, of course, I believe my children, but it's just to hear this woman I trusted and that she already knew before I was there in January. And a lot of the pieces started to come together, even of how funny Keith was acting. And but then to know that she'd been put out and taken. And when she's referring to her children, her biological son was there, and they were also trying to adopt Haitian children. The babies, they only knew her as mother, and Keith never let her back in to see them.
Wow. So you're hearing this confirmation basically of what, and it's all going, well, I believed this already, but now I have this adult that is married to the man doing this stuff saying, watch out, my husband / soon to be ex-husband is bad and very bad. And I am so sorry. That had to be jolting for sure. And I feel for her. I mean, obviously we don't know what her life is. We just know that statement of hers is that had to be heartbreaking for her to realize. And it's so interesting, being, if her story is what it is, she's sitting there in a prayer service, gets a vision of this happening to a young boy by her husband. She begins rebuking it apparently, but then it's confirmed that what her vision was during prayer was actually happening. Yeah, it's all pretty mind-blowing. Do you have any thoughts on that email? Obviously we
can move forward.
So yeah, let's move forward now to Dr. Michael Brown and Globe and where that comes in. Because Michael Brown, did you email Dr. Michael Brown? Is that what had happened? Or did he email you? Or tell us how he got involved.
So I believe when it comes to Dr. Brown, Steve got the ball rolling there, and it would have been through most likely reaching out to Tom Berry or Professor Gladstone, Bob Gladstone. And because those were her trusted leaders. Mm-hmm. It was through them that Dr. Brown inserted himself. So as far as in regards to me, I was trying to still touch base with Keith for a little while. He would not take my phone calls. One day he finally did call me and I was shocked. And when I picked up the phone, he really was just trying to say that he wanted me to tell another adoptive parent that he was trying to reach her daughter, that they were going to be coming into town. Now, we did not know about Keith yet at this point. We knew about Vance. Mm-hmm. And this is 2-3 weeks into this where Keith was not being very good to us as parents, but he reaches out to me asking if I would tell this mother to answer the phone because he wanted to talk to her adopted daughter. This is the oldest daughter that I was telling you came to the orphanage at age 9 that Keith used to hug and kiss on.
Yep.
He was asking to bring her to a hotel to visit with them for the weekend while they were in town.
Jeez.
And the mother already was freaking out over what she was finding out and said absolutely no. And she didn't let him take the phone call. But that's the last time I heard from Keith. So I turned my attention to Globe at that point. We started the first meeting with the Haiti task force at Globe.
And
that's
Haiti,
when
Haiti task forces, they got 2 people. And they basically put them in this so-called task force to do the internal investigation. Now, obviously, in hindsight, we've spoken over the phone about this, and on the record, if you knew then what you know now about how this internal investigation stuff works, you would just immediately have stuck with law enforcement and not, oh, we'll take care of this, don't go legal, because there were emails going out to all adoptive parents saying, do not go legal. And this was Michael Brown's email to adoptive parents, right? He said, do not go legal, trust the process, and don't post on social media. Those are the 3 things that he put in bullet points. Do not go legal, don't go social media posting about Globe, and trust the process. Like literally, it's like playbook, the same things he says now. It's literally his script, same thing. And so now you are just going as a parent going, okay, we'll sit with this task force because probably they're going to figure this out and then take it legal, right? You're thinking task force internal, they're going to figure this out. They're going to walk us through it and they're going to blast it, right? So take us into those meetings.
I thought they were going to partner with us because why not? They're fellow Christians who care about children. They have orphanages all over the world. I thought they would be devastated and partner with us. In hindsight, I have been told even recently by our investigator that is what hurt us the most in the investigation is we should have never gone to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, just for the sake of you, Melissa and Shersty and other adoptive parents out there, I know that people, when they listen to these type of podcasts, they hear the stories. Everybody thinks that they would have done the right thing. Everybody thinks, why didn't you just go to police? Why didn't you just go to international law enforcement? Why didn't you just this? Oh, clearly you just need to do this. I just want to tell everybody that's going to try to put a comment like that or say that, just back off and leave them alone. Because you don't know what you don't know until you're standing in the shoes of these women, of these adoptive parents, these husbands and wives making these decisions that have trusted leadership in front of them. They have people that Michael Brown, clearly he'll do the right thing. Clearly they'll help us do the right thing and get justice. So now in hindsight, we all know, don't trust these people, go to law enforcement and go legal on these things, and sometimes even go media. But I just want to say that for y'all's sake here, because I know that there's going to be people that say, well, clearly they should have just done this, clearly this. It's like, well, clearly, things are not as clear until you have some hindsight about it. So go on and talk about the task force and what happened there.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, our situation is unprecedented. It isn't just that Americans were traveling to another country to harm children. When we see those cases where men get busted by ICE for doing this, these were children that were adopted from that country, brought to America, then telling their adoptive parents in mass numbers. This is uncharted territory.
Yeah.
And so we were being turned away even when and Melissa will speak to that, when the police report first was made. We didn't know where to go, where do you file the charges in this situation? And so so there was action being taken, but it was all very confusing.
It's like local law enforcement, FBI, ICE, who takes the case, and they pass the buck and they don't know where
Florida was fighting over jurisdiction with FBI and then ICE. I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes complication on their part. We have seen emails with it. But so it was July. So we met with the task force, and Melissa can definitely speak to that if you'd like. As far as what the experience was like, and I can tell you about Dr. Brown's involvement.
Yeah, talk about Dr. Brown's involvement if you would.
Yeah. So after our task force meetings, I received a phone call from Dr. Brown. It was in July of 2010, and he called to first give me his heartfelt condolences that my children had experienced this, and that we were going through this. And but his purpose of the call was to let me know that when Keith Lashbrook used to come and minister on his fire campus, we're talking around the year of 2007, they would let him speak as a missionary. His daughter attended that campus, and that's why they, through that, started allowing him to minister to students. And then he started a type of ministry on their campus. And Dr. Brown wanted to make me aware of what happened. He said that through this father-daughter ministry that Keith started on their campus, that a whistleblower came forward to their staff and let them know that Keith had been definitely crossing the line, heading into sexual misconduct with one of the females, possibly more. I do can speak to that more if you'd like, but absolutely sexual misconduct was taking place in his RV where him and his wife lived when they would come to Charlotte. And Keith had been removed from their campus over this situation. It was either 2007 or 2008, the summer of. I'm not great on that timeline, but others.
And this
can
was
speak to
happening
that.
with a student that was like 18 to 25 years old at the Bible school.
Correct.
Okay.
She would have been young, 18, 19 years old. She had issues with her father, and Keith was taking her through a deliverance process and would bring her back to his RV, and Cindy would be asleep in the bedroom with her hearing aids out, and he would lay down with this student. He would coddle her, rub her feet, massage on her. At one point, he tried to cross the line. She tried to leave. She felt uncomfortable. He went after her, came up behind her and pulled her back in, told her if she did not allow him to finish the deliverance process that she would be dead within the year.
My God.
So another student went on her behalf to pastoral care because, these girls were looking at him like a father. But then they got in the middle of it at fire, not specifically Dr. Brown, other staff got in the middle of it, and they had him removed from campus. He was not to come back. Now, mind you, this is while I was serving as Keith's stateside adoption coordinator. I had no idea.
You were Keith's stateside adoption coordinator. Keith is doing these things to women on the fire school campus.
Michael Brown knows about it.
Michael
Yes.
knows
And
about
does
it.
not make you aware of it, even though he knows that you're working with him and he knows that your
Kick him off
children are
campus.
living with him in Haiti.
That is correct. And that was my 10-year reunion. Was the summer of 2008 was my 10-year reunion from Brownsville, from BRSM. And I saw Dr. Brown. He met my son, Benjamin, who was home from Haiti. And he asked me questions about my role with Keith. He asked me how many children I still had that I was adopting, and inquisitive questions that I answered. Not one time did he say anything about what had taken place, that what Keith had done, or even like, hey, can I talk to you later? I have something important to tell you. He did not. He waited until this surfaced and called me in July of 2010. And now he's telling me, and I'm jaw drop, taking it in for the first time. And now he didn't tell me every single detail. He just said he glazed over.
There was some
that
misconduct, basically.
Misconduct.
Yep.
So I said, did you report this to Globe? And he said, no, but I'm going to now that I'm hearing these things. Now, mind you, we didn't know yet about Keith, that we just knew he was suspicious and covering up for his brother-in-law. He said, so I'm going to make them aware now. And I said, please. I told him a task force has been formed. So he didn't actually tell. This was July 2010. 10, he didn't reach out to them until November 2010.
5 months later, 4 or 5 months later.
What in the world?
And while Keith is still doing orphanage work. So 4 or 5 months goes by. All these adopted kids are still out there that have been abused by Keith. And Michael Brown calls you in July, says, we're going to make people aware of all this, tells you that he knew of sexual misconduct from Keith, kicked him off campus because of it. This sounds so reminiscent of every single situation like that we've come across this last year, where it's like, well, somebody did something, so we're going to kick them off our campus, but we're not going to make it widely known because, you know, it's not our jurisdiction, or it doesn't. I don't know what these people's issue is, but like when there's somebody that does this to a woman and they're in ministry, they need to be blasted.
Yeah,
it needs to be
sure.
blasted out there. It needs to go in, like, you know, I mean, they need to be blacklisted from ministry work, because it is, and this is even worse because it involves, see, first you got an 18 or 19-year-old student. Brown finds out. Well, what's Brown's issue with that? He has his own compromise from 7 years prior. Mm-hmm. So of course he's not going to out anybody, because he's like, well, I've been slapping butts, you know, since 2001 and kissing girls on the lips that are 19. Like, well, of course you're not going to do anything about it. And so now you find out that it's children are involved with Vance, and he probably knew about Keith's situation too. Like, now he has to, because there's massive legal implications, but he still slow-rolled the whole thing for 5 months. It's just, this man is so unfit for leadership for the body of Christ. It is mind-blowing that this man is under investigation right now from Firefly. And if these guys don't do the right thing and put a strong, they need to take this into the Firefly. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to say it right now. Like, Ron Cantor, you need to be all over this, bro. I'm actually going to reach out to Ron about this. But like, y'all need to force your Firefly people to, like, and Ron's not a part of Firefly. He's a part of Tikkun, but still, like, somebody needs to force the Firefly investigation to jump on this right here. You realize that this man's whole ministry the last couple decades has been massive cover-up after cover-up, allegedly. So I just got to go on a rant there, because this this involves children. It involves, go ahead, Christina.
Well, I want to say too about, not only did Dr. Michael Brown not make you aware of this, he knew that Keith Lashbrook had done this to a young woman, and instead of making his students and people aware, he sent you. They sent their grads to work with this orphanage.
Yeah.
Right? It's so he knew you were going by yourself sometimes to visit your children and be around this man that acts this way. I just don't understand how he could let that happen. I mean, I do now because of what we know about him, but it's just so messed up. And this one's not very long, but I do want to read this email from Dr. Michael Brown. This is an email that he sent to Doug, who is president of Globe, was at the time?
The leader of Globe at that time.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Doug Gaiman.
It says, "Dear Doug, thanks so much for your time on the phone today, along with that of Mike and Sandy. We're praying with you for God's best to come out of this very difficult situation."
And that's the task force, Mike and Sandy at that time.
As promised, here's a summary of what we feel is very important for Globe to be stating and doing for the best interest of all involved, followed by a summary of my counsel to our grads. Please contact me if any questions arise at any point in the coming days. Okay, we are encouraging Globe to make clear to the grads and others involved. 1, we are aggressively working to clean up the Haiti orphanage situation on site, though that will take some time. 2, we are aggressively working to warn adoptive families that there has been abuse and that their biological children could be in danger. 3, we are dealing with some of our missionaries involved who, though they were not involved in any sexual abuse, are dealing with some personal issues and are on hold from all ministry and fundraising until full restoration can be achieved. I have encouraged the grads to, so this is what Dr. Michael Brown told you guys, what he told the grads. 1, give Globe some more time, assuring them that the investigation is continuing and that actions are being taken, some of them potentially imminent, but being patient with the process is best. 2, do not take legal action at this time. 3, do not send out letters or make posts on social networking sites attacking Globe. 4, believe that Globe is not trying to cover anything up or simply protect its own reputation or that of its missionaries. This is all so familiar. It is literally exactly what he said about the IHOP KC stuff, which he turned out to be terribly, terribly wrong about.
He was wrong.
And this also, I just do not take legal action. How are you going to tell parents whose children have been essayed not to take legal action? Also, do not send out letters or make posts on social media networking sites.
Attacking Globe. That's the word he used.
Yeah, attacking Globe. But really, you're trying to like make parents aware of what's going on. That's
doing
like
what you should have done.
That's like mom code. If something is going on and you know another mom needs to know about their own kids, you let them know. And so it's so the way he frames it. And who does he think he is, like, monitoring grown adults' parents, their social media posts? This is exactly what he did with IHOP-KC, and I just do not get where he gets off thinking that he is like the like HOA of the internet or something. He tells everybody what they can and can't post, and it's like, this is my life, this is my kid, this is my family and my story, and I just can't.
It really comes down to the fact that this is 2010, 2011 or 2010. Like, this is back in the day when social media just started becoming a powerful tool. And these guys cannot handle the fact that people have a voice that's outside of their jurisdiction. Our grads, our alumni, our people within our ministry. Oh, you can't have a voice unless you stand in the pulpit and you're God's anointed. Unfortunately, now it's the digital printing press, and we're going to speak up. We're going to tell the truth, and we're not going to wait for the guys in the big positions to do the right thing, because sadly they will not do the right thing. It's the men in the positions of power. Not all, of course, we know this, but many times it's those guys that have done the things like this: the child abuse, the CSA, the clergy sexual misconduct to adults. Like, it's all a part of covering up for each other and covering up for the reputation, which covers up for the ministry money, which keeps the ministry money flowing in, which keeps these guys in business, keeps them in ministry, keeps them doing the thing. And that email from Mike Brown telling them, here's what we should be doing and what we should be stating. It's like, here's your talking points, and here's my talking points, and here's how we're going to control this situation.
And there's no mention of the kids. There's no mention of any sort of care for what these families have gone through. It's all about control. It's all about control, not once about care. It's about what you need to do and how you need to handle it, but not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. My heart is, broken for you. Like, there's just no mention of the kids or the families and what they're going through. I just don't get it.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question here as we kind of come to a wrap, because of just for the sake of time. So obviously we pointed out the process. We know that Keith and Cindy Lashbrook, just to recap, and then I want to ask you a question here. Keith and Cindy Lashbrook ran an orphanage where Keith was abusing children, it sounds like, the whole time. They brought in Vance and Hannah Cherry, and Vance was abusing boys basically the whole time. We know that eventually those things were known by Globe, known by Mike Brown, and those things were not exposed in a timely manner at all to warn, because what ended up happening is many of the other adoptive parents had situations in their own home with their own biological children, because we know when this happens to children, they don't know what's going on, and they just perpetuate what happened to them, sadly. And these children all need psychological care. They all need therapy. They all need help. I want to ask you this: Did Globe or ever give? Was there ever payouts to help pay for the care and therapy of the children? Was it sufficient? And then if so, or if not, where we're at now in speaking up, what would you like to see happen at this point for the sake of your children and all the children involved?
So to the first part, we did eventually retain an attorney, and several parents came together and filed a civil lawsuit against Globe. That played out in court until 2019. And they did like a mass payout that was very low. Each kid got anywhere from a couple thousand to, I know two of the boys that had been affected the most, they maybe got upwards of that by 10. It's not enough to do any type of inpatient therapy or anything like that. It was for Globe to just settle it, wash their hands. At this point, parents were pretty exhausted and over it. Again, that was 2019. A lot of my kids were already raised at this point, and we just kept trying to find what therapy we could find for them.
We're talking about 40 children involved in this civil lawsuit?
Yes. No, not that many were in the lawsuit. Maybe 15.
Okay, so
in the lawsuit.
So I know there's likely legal implications to amounts of money and things like that. So let's just say it like this. I mean, you gave kind of
about 18.
Okay, so we're still talking with Globe, like there's lots of money involved in this organization, right? I mean, this is like you got funneling lots and lots of money. You've got these kids that per session in a therapy session, maybe if it's a good one, $150 at minimum, I'm guessing, for $150 per therapy session, maybe for a 45-minute or an hour. And this is deep, long-term work you've got to do to help these kids through this stuff. And we're talking the amount to pay maybe 1 month of somebody's rent or something was likely paid out, or less. And like, this is like kind of a joke in my mind.
Definitely.
But I also understand. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to speak for myself, I can't speak to the other families, but for myself, it wasn't even just the hourly fee, but we would get into different therapy places. We feel like, okay, here we are. And we were turned away 2 and 3 times from certain therapists that they did not feel equipped to handle what some of my children needed and to move forward. I have had to have one of my children placed in residential treatment where I took on work to be able to afford that. And after the very expensive down payment, it was $3,250 a month. $3,250 a month for a year. So that's the kind of therapy some of these children did need, because it was extensive in what she needed. So when we first went to Globe, we were simply asking for them to help network with parents to find the types of therapists we needed, because like Pensacola area is very limited in that. And so I think the second part of your question was,
Well, yeah, the second part, and I just want to hammer in on that first point, and I think this is just a picture of the problem, is that, you finally take it to civil lawsuit, and finally goes through 9 years after the fact, and then you've got this like payout that in a scenario with a major issue where somebody has to have residential therapy, it's $3,000 plus a month, and maybe ballpark amount that could have gotten paid out to one of these kids was like maybe half of that if they were lucky. And it's like or not even. So I just want to be like, look, like body of Christ, like elders, churches, like when these things happen, we've got massive budgets for buildings. We've got massive budgets for, I mean, I don't know what your budgets are for, but like, can we not take care of the least of these? Can we not, like the whole point of the Globe, the whole point of these missions organizations, the whole point of the church is to literally like true religion is helping the orphan and widow. Like what more do we need from the biblical narrative here to command us to find a way? And so it's just really disheartening to know that, it's just, I mean, I think Doug Gaiman at the end of the day, and I think we'll get into a conversation about him in the other podcast, but Doug Gaiman, was he the leader of Globe when these civil lawsuits went down? And I think there's a letter saying that he said he had never been to Haiti, but then it was proven that he had been to Haiti. Is that right?
Yeah, I had been told that he had been to Haiti before, like as I served for Keith, as I worked as a stateside coordinator. Keith and Doug were pretty close. Like they would play golf together. When he was in the States
Keith,
and all that.
the child abuser? Keith, the child abuser?
Yes, and Doug
Gaiman, the leader of Globe, were close?
Yes,
Dude.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And Doug said he had never been to Haiti? How did that narrative come about?
Perhaps my memory, as I served for Keith, knew of times that Doug had gone there. I think it's in a letter he states that you have that he hadn't been there.
We'll look
possibly.
that up. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but to even speak.
So
to
we'll
what
just
you
say
said-
allegedly on all
Yes,
that.
allegedly. Yes, yes. And so Doug Gaiman was the president at the time, and remained. But in 2012, someone I knew that was still a Globe missionary reached out to me to let me know that Buford Lipscomb, who is really in charge of all of it, he was over all of Liberty, and then he would have been the boss over Globe. He made Doug Gaiman step aside that year, and said to this person I know that he had to come in and clean up Doug's mess. So really, the buck really stops with Buford Lipscomb.
Okay. So Buford came in and
I think Doug
quote, cleaned
Gaiman's
up
the yes
Doug's.
man.
He cleaned up Doug's mess.
mess.
Whatever that is.
So
well, we know what it is now for the most part.
Yeah, now I know. But he would have been involved also through that process, the lawsuit and all that.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say for our listeners, this is a multi-layered. It gets deeper and deeper and darker and darker. And this is just the beginning. You know, hearing Natalie's story, we are going to talk to Melissa. We're going to talk to Shersti. We're going to dive into more of these emails.
And if there's other whistleblowers about this that know things, then reach out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to keep on this topic and digging into this, because I know there's even so much more that we didn't even go over today with you, even Natalie.
Yeah.
So this is just an intro for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't touch on Keith, and we're at the end of our time
Well,
of how he was discovered. Yeah.
Tell me how he was discovered. Give us 2 minutes. Give us the 120-second breakdown on it.
Yeah, I'll just brief. It was in November. My daughter. It was a private situation that I can't actually say. But it was through her and a conversation we were having that I found out that Keith was abusing her, and then other girls started to come forward from there. And again, that's when I realized it made so much sense to me then as to why my once dear friend did not care to protect my children, wasn't shocked when I told him what Vance had done.
It makes so much sense.
And Keith Lashbrook and Vance Cherry are still out in the wild, just living life. And
yes, both are in Indiana.
This needs to be known.
Yeah, wherever. Yeah,
this needs to be known, and because people that do this to children
don't stop.
They're dangerous. They are dangerous human beings. And those that are their friends and possibly know about it, we're not going to say guilt by association to everybody that knows somebody like this is just guilt, because clearly the reality is you thought he was a good guy. You were friends with him a little bit. I mean, you thought you trusted him until your daughter came out, and then you realize that he's working with the guy down the street to do this in Haiti. But anyway, look, we're going to wrap this up, guys.
Yes.
There's let us know your comments below. Please like this video and share this video. We're going to dive in soon here with Melissa, also with Shersti on the next couple episodes. And like Christina said, I think we're going to dig real deep into this story, and because this is the type of thing, we talk touch not my anointed. I'm going to say touch not the children. Touch not the children, because vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And sometimes the podcasters will be the tool of vengeance to just bring the information. I see
Amen.
you looking at me with the side eye like, what are you about to say?
I wasn't trying to look at you. I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to let Natalie close it out. If there's anything else you wanted to say to the families, the victims, or just any other part of your story, or anything that you want to make sure you say before we shut it down.
Well, just to answer the second part of your question of what we want to come out of this, I'm certainly not opening all this up again for fun. This has been very painful over the past month, even for my kids to have to revisit this. But it's in the hope that possibly there is a door opening to maybe bring justice for my children, for my Haitian children, that maybe this time around, and not just for them, but like you said, to protect the other children that they have had access to over the past 15 years.
I think that's beautiful. I just, I didn't say this at the beginning, but I went to Haiti in 2012 on a very short-term mission trip. It was an awesome experience. I loved it. But obviously, when you go on a short-term thing, like, you don't know much. It's not, but you're impacted. And I know that there is a lot of controversy surrounding the Haitian earthquake and the way it was treated and the way children were treated. And what does justice look like? All I'll say is that these children matter deeply and dearly to the Lord. We all know that. These children that are now adults. I mean, I look at Elijah speaking on the Laura Lynn podcast and telling his story, and he's a grown man. And a lot of times it takes years for people to realize what happened to them and to speak out. Justice matters. I don't care the age of a child victim. There's a little child inside of them that still needs to be addressed and spoken to and healed, even as a grown person. And so I don't know what I'm trying to get at here. Is just to say, whether it happened to an American child in America or Indiana or wherever, or whether it happened to a Haitian child in Haiti, all children they deserve to be protected and they deserve to be cared for. And, the statement made by Keith to you in that moment of slip, I'd call it a Freudian slip, where he said to you on the phone, "Oh, this is Haiti. Like, if I dealt with everything that happened in Haiti, I'd be on the phone all day." Well, you should have been on the phone all day. You should have been, because these children mattered. And these children that are in y'all's care and in the care of so many of these adoptive parents, they still matter and they deserve to be heard. And I'll say this, as their voices are raised up, I think there will be more children that come out of different scenarios from that earthquake that will have the strength and power to speak up as well. Do you mind if I just pray before we end here, Natalie?
Please.
Lord,
Yes.
I thank you for Natalie and for her story, for her boldness to share, as well as Shersty and Melissa and so many others out there that maybe don't get a chance to be platformed on a podcast. But Lord, you hear their voice, you hear their cry. And for all these children, you hear their voice and you hear their cry. And Lord, we just want to take a stand with them in prayer and with our voice and just say that they matter and you care deeply about them. We pray that justice would roll in like a heavy river, like a tide that's unstoppable. And it doesn't matter how high and mighty these men thought they were. Lord, you see and you know, and nothing can stop your vengeance. And we pray, Lord, that there would be true repentance and maybe even an outing of themselves, that they would put themselves under the, humble themselves under the mighty hand of God, that there might be mercy for eternity. But God, we ask you to bring justice and guide these women as they speak up. Give them grace, give them provision, open doors of opportunity and finance and just provision for these children to be taken care of. In the name of Jesus, amen.
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 Wake up and win. Wake up.